All right. It seems we are live now. Awesome. Well, thank you for all participating in this session. Today we are going to have a quite interesting session regarding our Vaadin 24.5 beta release. We are approaching GA quite soon, but before that, we wanted to give you a glimpse of what is expected with the latest release, and we've got quite cool stuff waiting for us. And actually, before we jump into the actual presentations and demos, let's kick it off with the introductions. So my name is Mika Andersson. I'm a product marketing manager here at Vaadin. And with me, we've got Jonas.
Hey, so that's me, a co-founder, but nowadays leading the product. So if you have any feedback where we should be going next, just find me out on Twitter on our forums and send me a DM.
And I'm Mark, long-time Vaadiner, and I'm here as the PM for Copilot.
Yep, and it's me, Leif, the full stack guy from a couple of weeks ago. I'm also product manager for Flow and Hilla.
Awesome. And today we're actually going to hear some really interesting news. Jonas will kick it off with some information regarding how we are about to expand Vaadin platform. Some really exciting news from there. The vision, the direction, and the general idea on how do we want to allow our users to achieve more with Vaadin. And a few words with regard to our full stack approach will be also covered by Jonas. And that will then be followed by Mark. Mark will present us Copilot, everything about Copilot, some pretty cool stuff waiting us.
No pressure, Mark.
No pressure, but it's really cool stuff, I can tell you. But we will soon know more about that. That will then be followed by Jonas's presentation regarding Control Center, really exciting addition to Vaadin platform. And last but not least, we are going to hear from Leif, the rest of the 24.5 release. Lots of interesting stuff waiting for us in there. And we really want to have this webinar as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions during the presentations and demos, please feel free to ask using the chat box right next to the video screen. And we do our best to address those questions during the presentation, and we have also preserved some 30 minutes till the end of the session. So the first part where we do the presentations and demos will take roughly around 60 minutes, and 30 minutes is preserved for the questions and answers in the end of the session. But as I said, let's keep this interactive and keep your questions coming.
Yeah,
challenge us. It would be cool to kind of hear where you see gaps and what you see as exciting as well. So let's kind of try to learn as much as possible if you're going the right direction or not.
Yep, and we already got the first question. I think we can answer it right away. So Peter asks, 24.5 beta, yeah. When will the final version be available? We thought we would do release candidate tomorrow, and then final 1 week after that. But we encountered some last-minute problems. So right now, the plan is release candidate 1 week from now, and then final 1 week after that. So that's kind of 15th of October or something like that.
But should be there really soon. So.
Yep.
Alrighty. So let's jump over to here. Not here, but maybe we could have it like this. So I want to kind of remind if there is anybody who didn't see the discussion between Mika and Leif 2 weeks ago around full stack. There is a really insightful session that you might want to take a look at on the trends in web development, how things have been like a pendulum going between like decoupled teams and architectures, and then like full stack teams and architectures. And as you know, we have always been really rallying for the full stack from the get-go from like 20 years. And the kind of a cool thing to see in the industry is that the pendulum is again going towards the full stack. So we are kind of again ahead of the curve, not like behind the curve. So it's really nice. Any kind of comments, Leif and Mika, on the full stack do you want to share as a preview of that discussion? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I thought that was super fruitful discussion that we had, or well, more of like Leif giving the presentation and I was listening it and really picking up some new things from that presentation. But as you said, I do feel like you said, Jonas, that the pendulum is always constantly swinging from one side to another. And as we know, we've come a long way from the early days of web, and from there we've seen the whole the journey. And now once again we are going more towards the full stack, and for good reasons. There are some challenges with sparse, and those were discussed in the webinar. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting stuff taking place at the moment.
Leif, you're muted. Oh, he's been speaking all the time, but
oh, why is nobody ever listening to me? Yeah, I was trying to say that I think it's really interesting, because I mean I have all the time been a full stack developer in one way or another, and that's why I very much felt at home at Vaadin. And then when talking to people, it's always kind of, yeah, well, Vaadin sounds cool, but we always have those kind of front-end developers, or someone says we must use Angular or whatever. And it's really interesting to see now how, yes, indeed, things seem to be changing, and that's really exciting.
So if I would capture the whole webinar in like 10 seconds, I think you guys, you are all kind of Vaadin developers as you are in this webinar. So you guys are right. Long time ago, it was like you all were backend developers, and with Vaadin, you were able to do the UI as well. So kind of for that kind of made it possible to build nice looking UIs, even as a backend Java guy. And I think nowadays the situation is that everybody's working in teams, and now we look at the team competencies, and those teams, as long as they can own the whole feature from end to end, both the front end and the back end, regardless if they are using TypeScript or Java building it, they are so much really crossing it compared to these decoupled setups where you basically front end team praying for some kind of API and throwing the ticket over the fence and negotiating when the back end team could pick it up, and then they ship something that is might not be optimal. It goes back and forth, and they're wasting a ton of time. So I think the message is that you are right being the full stack developer. Anyways, let's not kind of spoil the webinar. There's a lot of discussion around this topic. So I just wanted to kind of, before jumping to actually showing what we have been building, remind us, why do we build this full stack, or how do we see this full stack platform? So in the end of the day, we are building this for you guys, so for development teams, so that you can build awesome apps for your end users. And hopefully we achieve two things in this: keeping you productive throughout the whole thing by not kind of tangling with you all kinds of low-level stuff or bugs or whatnot, and also at the same time provide cool components and features that really make the end user's application smooth and nice, and so that the end users can be giving you nice feedback instead of something else. So what you are getting most of the cases, what we have been observing, is all kinds of business people, PMs, whatnot, are telling you what features you should have and what are requirements or spec for those features. And then there are designers who are nowadays mostly drawing in Figma and saying that, hey, it should be looking like this. And if you really want to up the challenge, somebody is pouring in like, I don't know, million lines of old Java source code and saying that, hey, by the way, you should be using this as a foundation, don't rewrite it all. So it's a tricky situation, and that we try to help with here at Vaadin. So first off, we have been for a long time providing you with this Vaadin platform that is pretty much frameworks and components. So now in plural frameworks, because we support both Hilla and Flow seamlessly integrated together. And that's I've been positively surprised by the feedback that this merge has been getting. There hasn't been like anybody being too scared about having more capacities in their frameworks, or I guess in the end of the day you could kind of call that one framework where you can code UI both in Java as well as in TypeScript. So that has been the foundation for a long time. So let's discuss what we are adding here. So our kind of goal has been to try to further elevate you and make you full stack developers really being able to kind of deal with these border regions, like how do we deal with this requirements part of it, how do we deal with the production part, because those are quite often painful and challenging. So first off, we added Copilot like 3-4 months ago, and it was cool and all, but it only worked with Hilla and React. So that's a bummer. So Mark will be showing how that works today with Flow. So now that works with everything that we have in Vaadin. So hope that will be interesting. Second thing that we'll be showing is that you can actually now cut and paste directly from Figma. So if a designer ships you a design, you can just cut and paste and be the hero of the day by basically coding either Java or React based on your choice, by not coding anything, just cut and pasting, and generates you everything that you need for that layout. And finally, what we are also adding here in the platform starting with 24.5, something that we haven't been discussing much is Vaadin Modernization Toolkit. So this is essentially, let me actually show you what it does. It's a transpiler, if you will. So it eats those million lines of old Java application. It can be eating Vaadin 7 or Vaadin 8 application or even Swing. It generates you modern Flow application. So basically, you can automatically transpile your old code base to be a modern Vaadin application. That's typically not the end outcome. Probably you want to kind of continue developing that further, but actually pretty cool and powerful thing if you happen to be blessed with a million lines of code somebody else wrote and you inherited that pile of code. So ask us more about this. We're not going to be giving a demo in this but it's might be a lifesaver for some. So final piece in here is completely new product that we are adding basically with 24.5 called Vaadin Control Center. And this tries to address the question, how the heck do I deploy this Vaadin application? And if I'm running that in production, how do I know what's happening? And if we actually know what's happening and help deploying it, could we actually get many more features for free? So do we need to really code for every application separately, things like, I don't know, user management, or could we just kind of have ready-made components for that? So that's the kind of direction where we are taking. And just maybe final note about this is that now we're quite happy about the width of the platform. You are still in the very center of this. This is for development teams. This is for Java teams. But we try to add these 3 green pieces in there to help you deal with the rest of the world in a more smooth manner. So now when the platform has grown horizontally a bit to help you, the next stage for us is actually just working on quality, improving whatever kind of observations you have in platform. Where are the gaps? Where we could add small features, new components, all that. So this kind of crazy period of expanding the platform, that's, I hope, over for now. And now we can really build on that platform. And with this, the roadmap for the next release after 24.5 is actually we decided that it's empty. There is no features at all, unless you guys chime in and you think that there is some really, really bad gap that we should be addressing, and then we'll try to be more agile and address those quickly. Anyways, I guess that's anybody wants to add anything? You guys have been quiet.
Yeah, I think one thing could be added here, because I mean, like we see here on the picture, it kind of grows in all the directions, but at the same time just reassuring that we still have lots of developers working on the core things, the both Hill and Flow frameworks and the UI components. Sometimes we may be we're so excited about the really greenfield new stuff that we build, so we talk a lot about that and not so much about the frameworks and the components, but they are still being developed for sure.
Yeah, and that's you'll also kind of show because there is a really exciting stuff in the core frameworks that we have been building right now. So I guess you'll demo that in the end of the session.
Yep.
Alrighty, should we switch over to you, Mark, for showing what the Copilot can do?
Okay, then can you add my slides to the stage? So yes, I was kind of asked, or we promised to show everything about Copilot. That's actually going to be a little bit of a challenge because there's a lot. So I'm going to hope that most of you have seen something about it. For those of you who haven't, just a little short, quick intro. So Vaadin Copilot is a visual editing tool. It, as the name indicates, it does have some AI features, but more than anything, it's kind of a tool that you can quickly call on to get UI work done more quickly. And it's a little bit special because it runs in your application in development mode. So you can quickly kind of edit a few things right there when you notice, instead of switching back and forth between code and kind of viewing in the browser. But it actually updates your code directly and is always keeping the code as the source of truth. But it also has a bunch of convenient tools to help you and kind of let's take a quick look at
can I add something about. Because yeah, sure. I think it's so freaking important to stress this code first thing, because I think if you look at the history, what happened was that first there was all kinds of design tools. We had Vaadin Designer as well. Some of you guys might be still using that, and all of those were modeled after things like Delphi and Apple's or kind of next steps UI editor, and that was good and dandy, but the problem was that even though you could draw quickly, you ended always painting yourself in the corner with this kind of closed model, how the layouts look like. And we struggle with that as well. We created multiple models over the years and tried to kind of find a flexible one. And the wake-up call for us, kind of pivotal moment, was when Apple announced Swift UI. They pretty much kind of killed UI editors in Xcode overnight, basically saying that, hey, this model where you just code and you see the results on the right side by side, that's the right one, that's the right take for it. And Apple took it a bit further. They kind of integrated all kinds of UI related small thingies within the code, like choose a color visually instead of just kind of writing or remember the names of the colors. So what I'm mostly excited about it is that I feel that we have invented something really new here in Vaadin Copilot. So we took that one step further and turned your application to be editable. It's kind of Copilot, you could say, it's an edit mode for your application, and it still preserves code as master. So it doesn't lose the flexibility of you controlling all the code. Anyways, I don't want to kind of steal the thunder from Mark.
Yeah, no, that's kind of, yeah, we're probably going to, by the way, go over time like we always do, but yeah, I think that's a good point. And we have been trying different models, and there's kind of a nice separation of concerns when you have a separate file, which is the UI file, but then it comes with a number of problems. For instance, when you're editing and you can't actually see data in it, and so on. So we have been thinking about this problem for a long time, and actually being able to edit the running application has been kind of a really good breakthrough for enabling a lot of things. So I have some videos I recorded earlier today. So here I have a project from start, 24.5, and there are some components here. And if I want to do some changes, I just activate Copilot and notice that, oh, I have a typo, but maybe I want the button to say save and nothing else. Maybe I want to rearrange something and align it to the right. And I can do that right in Copilot just by activating it with the shortcut or by clicking the button. I can jump over to code and add a click listener or things like this. And as you could see, the code was actually updated live as I dragged and dropped and so on. And if we can actually go to my next slide, I'm going to shortly show kind of a little bit how the AI stuff might look like. So here we have a kind of a form, and I want to do, it's pretty good to use AI to do boring, repetitive things. So I need helper texts for all these fields. I don't feel like adding that in the code and having to edit it. I call on the AI. This, by the way, is real time. Nothing is done to the video recorded earlier today. Sometimes it's faster. This time it was this. If it has to import new components, it might do a reload of the thing, but now you see it has added helper text to all the fields. Maybe it's not exactly what I need, but I saved a lot of time and kind of manual copy and pasting. I can now edit the text.
I think it's kind of good to point out that while GitHub Copilot that probably most of you are using, it's kind of a autocomplete for your code. This Vaadin Copilot is quite different. So we like to think that it's a junior developer who knows about Vaadin and design stuff in Vaadin that's sitting next to you and can kind of do boring, repetitive tasks. Or if you don't know how to do something, you can just ask. While they are junior developer, they are not as smart as you would want them to be. They have read all the documentation of Vaadin and they understand it that way quite well. And hopefully the AI becomes more and more smart, so you can delegate more boring stuff to that Vaadin Copilot. Also, kind of I think most people at Vaadin, we nowadays use both Copilots at the same time. So Vaadin Copilot is not a replacement at all for GitHub Copilot and vice versa. So you just should be using both side by side.
Exactly. They do different things and kind of also the AI is just a small part of what Vaadin Copilot can do. As you saw, most of the things are actually regular visual editing and so on. But yeah, the AI prompting can be quite helpful when there's a boring task or something you don't know quite how to do. Instead of looking it up in documentation, you can ask the AI and then modify it to your needs. But yeah, getting into maybe the more interesting stuff. So about new stuff in Copilot, and that's actually a little bit of a challenge to list here because we have actually been improving and adding things to Copilot in 24.4 as well, but you might not have heard of all of those things. I'm not going to go through all the kind of adjustments and small features we have added, so I just listed and will kind of show you some of the bigger ones.
But there is tons and tons of stuff. So I would say the downside starts to be that there is too much stuff in Copilot already. So we need to be kind of looking at maybe reorganizing the UI by hiding some of the stuff because we have so much.
Absolutely, and it's a new product, and we have been moving very fast, and kind of that's actually, like Jonas said, we are not planning to add some big features like the flow support was a huge feature we have now added. We're gonna a little bit pause and actually we have a long list of small things and also listening to users and kind of adjusting and seeing what are the rough edges that we have for a little while now is the plan. So anyway, yes, the new things, we have some new panels. So there's a documentation panel. there's a routes panel, or it actually appeared secretly in 24.4 and it's been improved. There's an experimental test generation thing, and we have some internationalization support. I'm going to show you, I'm just listing these now, we'll look at them shortly. There's a section here called importing, which I'm very fond of. So images, fields from Entity and Figma, I'll show those in a minute. And as I said, kind of the flagship thing, or at least the one that has taken the most development time, is full feature parity for Flow with Copilot. So maybe just jumping into those, showing short snippets of kind of videos of that. So that's the documentation panel I was talking about. You can select a component and it will fetch the documentation for that component. A small feature that once we had it, they realized that's very useful to have. And as my next trick, videos are hard. Yes, so you can see we have the regular panels, like outline and so on, but the routes panel has been getting a kind of a refresh and getting more features. You can see, basically you get a convenient overview of all the routes and access, and then you can create new ones. So basically add new views. So it's a quick way to do that.
Can you do that both for Flow and Hilla?
Yes. Well, I can go. You can actually see.
Oh yeah, there we have it. Yeah.
Yes. And you can see, you can select type of the view and kind of, yeah.
So this actually generates code files for you automatically in the right place with the right names. And so
yeah,
it's kind of handy way of starting a new UI.
It doesn't do very much, but it's very convenient because you don't have to touch those multiple places that you would otherwise have to touch. So the next little snippet here is we have the UI test generation, which is one button and can be handy. Try it out. It's experimental. And then we have the internationalization, which will kind of, you can use to turn your static strings into translated ones, or kind of use the API for that. And we won't go into that very deeply, but one of the really cool things about that is that it integrates with Control Center for localization. So you can kind of bring in somebody else to translate the strings then, and so on. So that's pretty cool. And maybe about the test generator, that's experimental.
About the kind of internationalization, quick comment. So we really wanted to, so it's last year we were looking at different features that we have been kind of ignoring for a long time, and internationalization was something that we were doing proper job. So we actually went through all the layers of the platform, created the internationalization APIs, made sure that those work well with Hilla, well with Flow, and then to the Copilot, so they can visually do internationalization in here, choose fields and translate, and we took that all the way to, in Control Center, you can create staging environments where you can invite external people, translators in there who are not developers at all, translating your UI. So if you say you want to kind of translate your app to Korean, you can do that by not knowing anything about the Korean. And all of this is well integrated. So things like we automatically take screenshots of your UIs and show to these translators the right context in where they are translating. So it's quite extensive feature that we don't have time to demo in today, but there's a good session about that in Vaadin Create later this month. So
yeah, I think that will be great. And yeah, we should do a deep dive about this. But so kind of in Copilot here, it's kind of handy because you don't have to go in and change all those static strings to find them and change them to the appropriate API calls. But also you might have used that feature in your IDE with some plugin previously, but here you can actually see visually where that string is, so it helps you a little bit, and it will show you which ones are already translated and so on. But then really kind of the power comes from how it integrates to all the rest of the ecosystem, so Control Center and so on. Maybe I can skip in my video here and talk about the UI test generation as well.
Before jumping in there, there's a
Yes.
good question. So the Clint is asking if custom flow components can be added to the palette in Copilot.
Not yet, but that's very high on our backlog to be able to customize whatever is in the palette. Yes.
And I
Good
think
question.
this is an opportunity to again talk about how this code-first approach helps. Because with Vaadin Designer, we had this big challenge that, well, you got your custom flow components, but because Designer kind of runs in its own environment, it doesn't actually have access to those components that are actually part of your application. So then it was almost impossible to be able to add custom components there. But now, thanks to actually running things as part of the application, these kinds of things are possible. Of course, it requires some development effort to actually make it happen, but it's still much more easy to do than what it would have been with Designer.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's
note
pretty,
on... Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's pretty high on our list, and yeah, there are some. It's actually quite easy to do when we're running within the application like this, just like Leif said. It's more of a kind of almost like more of a UX kind of designing how it should work, and we have some really cool thoughts about. You will probably want to have kind of shared palettes between the whole team, so you can find what components you have kind of in
Almost
the project.
like design system.
Yes, exactly. And then maybe you can share even company-wide parts of the palette and so on. So there are some plans there that we plan to get to. Very excited about that, but not yet.
I'll highlight one thing that is kind of unrelated, but I think Leif, it continues what Leif said. So this being code first, that there's an interesting implication, not just that you can edit the code as you wish, but the interesting implication is that you can stop using Vaadin Copilot at any time. So if you have been using that when you think that it sucks, just delete it, stop using it. And nothing bad will happen because it's code first. You own all the code. All the code is formatted as you want it to be. So there is kind of a zero downside for trying out Vaadin Copilot in your projects. If that's kind of working great, then you kind of get the productivity benefits. If it's not for you, you didn't lose any time because you can just continue working where it left your project.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and kind of I think it's good to point out that the whole idea, like how we have tried to build Copilot, is that you should be able to just quickly call on it when you realize that, hey, now I could use it. If you see a typo in a label, you can change it right there. And it updates your code, so that's it. You don't have to use it for anything else, or you can use it for a long time, but it should be right there to able to help you. We have a new question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just about to ask. We've got a question. Can it also take care of like the regular layout related stuff, margins, paddings, and whatnot?
Yes, I didn't show that now, but we already have margin padding and so on. There are a few things that are missing, like sizing. So, and that's high on the list and will probably appear during the next quarter here.
Tricky question. Can we use Flow Copilot in JMix platform? Would be cool if that would be possible. I mean, if you are able to run Cuba on or JMix on top of 24.5, and if it doesn't specifically disable Copilot, it might work. We have not tested that. Please report back if that works out. That would be really interesting to know.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yes. I was going to mention just about the UI test generation. I kind of glossed over it. It's an experimental feature, but it will appear here. It's experimental because it uses AI to kind of, on the view you have, you press the button, it generates some tests that it thinks that like basic tests. And it can be quite handy, but it still makes quite a lot of mistakes, kind of finding the right elements to check if they are in the right place and so on. Sometimes it works perfectly. Sometimes it has glitches that we are working to teach it better. So it's experimental for now. Also, we're interested to hear a little bit in which direction you would like us to take it. It seems like a really convenient kind of get started, but are there other things that would be handy for this tool? So try it out in some
press the magic
test.
button.
Yeah.
One more thing about this, because I think you kind of undersold it, and I think that was intentional, because it's a magic button that actually creates tests for the whole view automatically with the one click on of a button. And a reason for underselling is that it sometimes works, sometimes it makes mistakes, but really, really cool thing about this is not like we just list the elements on the screen and auto-generate code that goes through the elements. No, we actually read through your source code for that view, and we actually try to understand what your view is trying to do. I mean, understand not just the UI, but actual logic in there. So this tool generates intermediate presentation of those use cases that you have on your view, and then it creates tests based on those use cases. So it goes way deeper than just like testing out the UI. So, but AI could be smarter, so it doesn't understand all of your intents.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, but has some problems that we want to improve still. So we have some plans for that. But you can try it out. It also adds all the needed imports and kind of adds all the file you need. So when it's done, you can just kind of run the test, which is pretty cool. If I can focus my presentation and actually go to the next slide instead of playing the video again, we'll have to see what we have up next. Yeah, this is actually pretty cool. So it's one of my favorite small features is that you can actually kind of paste an image into your application, and it actually adds it to the correct location in your project file. So it's not the URL, it puts it in the, as you can see here, puts it in the resources as an image, and then updates the code so it shows the image. A very small but quite convenient and handy feature.
Yeah, we got very long debates at the Vaadin office, or not Vaadin office, but in Vaadin internal Slack channels about, well, how do I add those images again? Because people seem to never remember the right way of doing it. But now it's very easy.
First, the location of disk where you need to add it. Then you need to have the wrong URL 3 times before you're like, oh yes, I was supposed to do it this way. It's very easy when you know it, but before that, it's easier with Copilot. So, and now it's showing that again. So the next thing you can kind of import is if you have an entity or a bean or something like this, you can actually now just kind of drag and drop that bean, which might be surprising, into wherever you want the fields for that bean. So it looks at the fields in the bean, in the entity, and creates fields for those. It's very basic right now. It just supports kind of the basic types and so on. And as you saw, just generates the field. But you can then go on to configure and lay out your things. And it's one of those boring things, again, that it really speeds up. So nice to have. And this is also one of the features we'd love to hear kind of feedback, what you would like us to add, because there is we have a bunch of ideas and we know that this is kind of basic, but you can already see that it's useful. So it would be great to hear from everyone what you think about that feature. Does anybody know the shortcut to actually jump to the next slide and not play the video again? And then we have one final kind of import stuff things, and Jonas, of course, spoiled most of these already. But
Thank you.
yeah,
Sorry.
so many use Figma. Designer, it's the favorite tools for designers that are designing UIs, and this is Figma. It's a drawing tool, but you can kind of have components pre-configured in it, like we have the Vaadin design system. So here is a design. I copy it. No surprise now. I hop over to Copilot and paste, and I get that complete with the layout, and kind of you can see that it pretty well matches how it looked in Figma. So this is kind of a big one. We're quite excited about this. You don't need anything special in Figma. You just kind of, if you get a design from your designer, you go in and select the area you want and you paste it.
Well, I guess you need one special thing in Figma, which is that you actually use Vaadin's component library there.
Yes, you don't need that, but your designer does. So yeah, that was what for now. Like we have this free component library, the Vaadin design system in Figma, which has our components kind of made in a Figma way, which designers can use. And that's a good idea to tell them that, hey, can you use this? Or if you're designing yourself, Figma is actually quite nice to use, just drag things around. If you're kind of, Figma is a free drawing tool, and if you start going crazy, of course, it won't import correctly into a structured application. But if you use a little bit of structure in Figma, so you use our design system and you favor the auto layout function in Figma, which is more of a structured layout, which mimics kind of a web layout like Flexbox, you can copy and paste then the result into a working file.
And
so
we
that's
use
pretty
horizontal vertical layouts for those in kind of translate those to horizontal vertical layouts in Vaadin, or?
Yes, we have some additional kind of if you have kind of a very free form layout, then we can kind of do that as well, but not recommended. We're also going to improve that kind of heuristic or algorithm that translates when you have done strange things, to try to mimic and get this as close as possible. So the idea is still that you get very far by just copying and pasting, but maybe you still want to add something in code, or you usually do, like adjust something related to responsiveness or change one layout to another or something. The people who design are not always aware of the structure you want to use in code, so you might have to adjust it, but still it's a very good speed up.
Just kind of repeating the obvious in here, because I think it's super magical. So when you cut and paste from Figma, or when you cut from Figma and paste in a view that is developed in Flow, it pastes as Java code. So it's kind of a mind-boggling that you can copy Figma and paste Java code.
Which gets us to my next slide, which is not this one. Pressing arrow forward actually plays the video again, which is not very... Anyway, yes, so Flow support. Here we are in my Hilla view, as you can see. I select something and copy it. I go over to my empty Flow view and paste that, and the thing I had in Hilla was pasted from Figma. I could have pasted from Figma straight here, but now we have Java code. So now we have full support. It's kind of unnecessary to show separately. When I edit the Flow view, it has all the same features that you can use with Hilla in Copilot. You can also use with Flow, so all the drag and drop and so on. One thing to mention is that it turns out that, or when you think about it, Java is very flexible in how you kind of structure your code and kind of create the UIs, and that's a little bit of a challenge. So that's one more thing that you can kind of try and give feedback to us, is that Copilot will try to put things in the right place, but we know that we don't support all the situations. So if you have kind of some structure that's not kind of working out and it doesn't do what you expect it to, let us know, and we'll kind of keep working on these things. And then the last thing I have, as we are kind of out of time for my section, I think, is that kind of as a side effect from adding flow support, we realized that since we have the code as source of truth and we always update the code and then show the result, we need the round trip to be very fast. So we need to kind of hot deploy as soon as possible, which means in Java land that we need hot swap to be enabled. And JRebel continues to be a good tool for this, but you can also use Java hot swap agent, and we have added some tools to help you with this. So basically, this is useful even if you don't use Copilot, but Copilot will help you to enable it. So as you can see down in the corner, when you hover the button or you enable Copilot, there will be a warning if hot swap is not set up correctly. It will tell you to install the plugin, which will enable hot swap and kind of check that you are running then with debug using hot swap agent, which is a new thing that appears in your IDE. And if you do that, Java hot swap will be fully enabled, and it's actually kind of those two steps that you need to do. One important heads up, in the latest IntelliJ 2024.2.3 has a bug in the JDK that they ship, so hot swap doesn't work, but that will be fixed soon.
So 2024.2.2, the previous maintenance release, that works just fine. So it's only for that one particular maintenance release.
Yes,
but I think this is kind of a super cool for everybody using Vaadin, regardless if you want to use anything commercial, if you want to use Copilot or anything else. It just makes so your development cycle so much faster. And I mean, you can set it up by hand, but I think 99% of the developers don't, because it's super tricky to kind of get all the JVM parameters just right and all the right versions of the hot swap agent to right places. So even if you don't like to get any visual help while editing UIs, I highly recommend that you click this one button and enable the hot swap agent, and it speeds up your cycle a lot.
Yeah, getting Copilot to work smoothly when you're visually editing kind of forced us to look at this. Everyone should have used this before already, just when you're coding, to get faster updates, but it's been a little bit of a pain to get it up and running. So now it's easier, and I think everyone should do that. So that's kind of all I had. Here's the same slide we started from with the summary. Yeah, that took a while, and we just skimmed over the features. So
yeah, and I actually do want to remind our webinar guests that we are actually planning to do a bit more deeper dive into Copilot, as well as our other major new release features, like for instance Control Center. So if you really want to get into details of how those works, look forward for upcoming webinars as well. But next, Jonas, Control Center.
Yeah.
Want to share a few words about Control Center? Being mindful on the timing. Let's try to be efficient with the presentation. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah,
well, we have got.
I'm the one to blame for interrupting everybody with extra notes.
We have a new question.
Time flies when you're having fun. Question, yes.
Yes.
Is there any plans in your roadmap to enable using the same declarative syntax in Flow, like the Hilla one? Not
could
per
take this
se,
one.
but you can. Yes, do it.
Well, how long do we have? No, let's not take the full answer, but it's something we've been thinking about a lot, but we're not really sure what it means, because wouldn't that kind of turn flow into Hilla? So there's some questions there that remain unanswered, and it's intriguing, but no specific plans.
Yeah, and since you can now mix Hilla views and flow views,
No, don't steal my thunder.
getting pretty close. Sorry.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump back to here. So Control Center, what the heck is this thing? It is 3 different things. So first off, it's for deploying Vaadin apps on Kubernetes. And the same thing that I was stressing on the Copilot, that it's a tool that you can just kind of stop using and your app goes and continues working just fine. It's kind of unintuitive that Control Center is also a tool that you can stop using at any time and your app continues working just fine. So Control Center is actually sitting on top of Kubernetes, and it tries to make Kubernetes easy for hosting Vaadin applications, but it preserves everything underneath in the Kubernetes. So whenever you feel that you want to do something that Control Center doesn't support, you can go through that surface and edit things directly in Kubernetes. You can turn off Control Center. It just, your app still keeps working just fine. The whole cluster stays there just fine. So hosting is the first, kind of deploying the Vaadin apps is the first thing. And obviously we support everything that runs Kubernetes, and nowadays everything runs Kubernetes. So I was looking at some study, and to me it looks like Kubernetes pretty much won over, becoming the lingua franca of hosting. Second thing is...
Jonas,
yeah, go ahead.
could you hide the question there? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
It was covering a bit of the slides.
Yeah. And the second thing is monitoring. This is vision. We want to make Control Center a great place to monitor applications, all the observability and logging, and looking at all the security vulnerabilities in your dependencies and everything, like on the while you are running your app in production. There is no features yet on this front, but this is a major thing we will be working on next year. And finally, we kind of observe that when we... So let's take back the parallel to actual core of the Vaadin. The great thing of being full stack when you have a framework and components in the same platform is that they can start to kind of understand each other. For example, if you have a data grid, you can scroll data and automatically knows how to load more data from the server side. So when we extend this same full stackiness to deployment, we can also start doing way more things for you automatically. Like you can add full featured user management with one click to your application, and you get all of that for free. So that's a interesting way for adding full stack functionalities to your application. We are working on multiple ones of these. First 2 that we are shipping is user management and this internalization feature that we mentioned earlier. But anyways, let's see how this actually looks like from here. No. Let's see if I'm... All right, yeah. So how to get started with Control Center, you go to documentation, and obviously you need a cloud first. In this case, we're going to be using just Docker Desktop for running Kubernetes locally. So that's like basically one button click, and then you have a Kubernetes cluster on your laptop. So after we have that, we should deploy Control Center, this tool of ours. So we just copy deployment command for it and run that on the command line, and it deploys Control Center to that cluster. And it already runs, so you can go and start installing the Control Center in there. It automatically installs everything that you need for hosting Vaadin applications. I'm just kind of cut and pasting password in there to make sure that nobody else can access this this is more relevant for actually running this on the cloud. But so we are kind of using Keycloak as a security infrastructure in there. So you need a local name for it. And then I just create my admin account for Vaadin Control Center so that it's me who can start using it. Then one click install, and it installs everything in your cluster. So I personally like to use K9S as a command line tool for observing what's happening in the cluster, so you can see all kinds of things that it was installing in there. It actually failed to install everything, so I just click retrieve button and it installs Postgres and Keycloak and certificate managers and ingress and all the kind of infrastructure that you need to set up to actually host your application. And typically you would be spending at least hours of time figuring out all the configuration for setting up like Nginx ingress servers and how do they route the request to your Vaadin applications running in parallel in your cluster, and how do you set up all the networking infrastructure and so that the firewall is set up just right between the different servers. And so hosting is complicated, but we try to make it as simple as basically clicking a button. So when the installation completes, it directs you to Control Center. And unfortunately, because now I'm installing it locally, I do not have a SSL certificate for this Keycloak instance. So it shows you an ugly screen that, are you sure that you are trusting your local host? Yeah, we are going to be sure in there. And then I can just log into Control Center with my credentials that we just created. So that gets you to Vaadin Control Center. And the first thing that you want to do there is install your application in there. So applications are packaged as Docker containers. In this case, I have already created my Vaadin application and compiled that to production, basically Maven package, and then choosing production profile. And after that, I have packaged that with Docker. When you are creating your Vaadin app from startofvaadin.com, you get the Docker config file automatically from there. So you can basically say Docker build, and then you get your Vaadin application. So I'm using that application. It's a super simple Hello World application in this case. And what I can do in there is also go and click this identity management toggle. So it says that, hey, my Vaadin application, I want to get user management for free. So one button click and I have a user management enabled for that application. And then I just give a name for that. So now I'm running that on localhost. So I needed to have basically in my etc hosts file, I have a couple of names I've mapped to my local host. So this is another one of those names. And I click deploy, and there it is. So now we have Vaadin application deployed to a cluster, complete with all the kind of infrastructure for it. So here you can just see what is there in the cluster, and you can see there in the middle that my application is running in a server. And if I zoom in there, I can see like Tomcat logs in my application and whatever is the kind of logging. So the cool thing here is that you get all this for free. So this is a full featured Kubernetes cluster that records logs and can restart your application servers as needed. And so there is it's pretty much like a industry strength way of hosting a Vaadin application. All right, so what's next? So let's see if it runs. And there it is. Super interesting Vaadin application with just 2 views. So in there, I clicked the private view, and the private view happened to be a flow-based view that was tagged with the a security annotation requiring me to log in. So when I clicked that view, it noticed that, I cannot let this user to go in there. And then it noticed that, this is running with Vaadin Control Center in a cluster. So let's kind of delegate this authentication to this new keycloak instance that we just created. So if you see the URL, it's keycloak.local. So this was a keycloak instance that does the authentication for us. So the problem is that we don't have a user account at this point. So let's go and create the user account. So we choose our application that we want to manage, and over there, go and create a user. So this is actually storing the users through Keycloak in a Postgres database that we also installed in the cluster. So you get all of this infrastructure for free, and it just works in there. So I'll create a user account for myself and create a password for myself. I mean, this can be just a foobar because I want the user to be forced to come up with their own password. And now if I go there, I can just actually use that new user account that I created, foobar123, and it forced my user to come up with a new password. So things like I forgot my password or forced to create new password or that type of things, you basically kind of get it for free. So kind of full-fledged user management. There is actually more. You can also click a button to enable two-factor authentication with like those authenticator apps showing a QR code that you need to scan, and you can go and delegate that to other providers. Like in this case, we could just create a Google login in there, and we would need to be filling in the client ID that we get from Google's UI. So I didn't do this in here, but it could also delegate to your corporate or enterprise identity managers, whatever you happen to be using. Those are pretty standard, and we support long list of them. We can also create user groups in here. So create an admin group, add myself in there. We can create roles. We can assign the roles to user groups. So as you can see, there is if you would be building all of this from scratch, it will take quite a while. If you would be building the whole cluster from scratch and configuring that from scratch, it would take quite a while. So this kind of gets back to the widening platform promise that will give you superpowers as a full stack development team. You can do all of this in super quick manner by just using Vaadin Control Center, and the outcome is Kubernetes cluster that you completely own and control. So it's not like us controlling or doing something kind of in a proprietary manner. It's a industry standard Kubernetes cluster where you have full access for all of that. Yeah, the kind of a quick note, the localization that we mentioned is also in here, so you can just enable that as well. And in there, I mean, right now it's not a localized application, so there's nothing interesting in here. We could maybe add a language in there and maybe like Finnish language, and then send over URL for our staging environment to somebody who knows Finnish, and let them to translate your application to Finnish. I guess that's almost. Oh, one more thing. It's also pretty cool that because this is now clustered environment, and one thing that you typically want to do in a cluster is scale your app. So scaling application. Now we have 3 servers. Poof. So that was as much as it took to actually scale your application. You can see it right there. You have now 3 full servers running Vaadin. I mean, this is now running in my Docker desktop, so it's just one laptop that's running that. But if that would be running on a real cluster in a real cloud, you would actually have 3 separate servers. So if one crashes down, or if you have a lot of load, it kind of handles all of that automatically.
You know what would be a cool feature?
All right.
If you click that button and you suddenly have 3 laptops.
Oh, that would be even better. That's like provisioning for, and then they send it over. And did you have any questions?
We do.
There are some. Well, one good question regarding the modules that are available with Control Center. We obviously went through the user management. We saw the translations. What else?
Yeah, and actually, maybe that leads to another question. What does it cost? So, because that's always the next question about the modules. So, first off, Kubernetes is fully free. It's an open source project. If you will be running this on, I don't know, you go and rent 10 servers from Microsoft, they will be charging you something for that for sure. If you run it on your Raspberry Pi on your closet, it would be free. And actually, that runs on a Raspberry Pi, so it's that the hosting part is cost whatever hosting costs. And I want to be super clear on this. So many companies who are building development tools, they see that, what we are going to be doing, we're going to be charging a ton for hosting, and that would be kind of tempting for a company like Vaadin to go into hosting business and make everything super easy and dandy for building application, then charge a ton for hosting. But no, it's you own the hosting, you are in control in there, you can choose wherever you host. The Control Center, it's also free, so everything that you did see in here is free. We try to add value-added features in there that are commercial. So three things at the moment that are the only ones that are commercial are adding enterprise identity managers. So social logins like Google are free, but if you happen to be running like, I don't know, Active Directory inside your enterprise, you want to connect that, then you need a paid plan. Also, this kind of translations for delegating translations for translators, that's part of the paid plan. And the third one is the two-factor authentication. So kind of a tiny value-add things in there are part of the paid plan, but kind of the full core is actually for free to use.
Cool. Can you actually elaborate a bit on how does the scaling work? You mentioned that we can scale up easily. Well, we are not going to get any new laptops by scaling it up, but the application will scale up. Will it work with Java as well?
Yeah, this works with Vaadin. So
Flow,
Hilla, anything working there. And so we have been kind of observing the pain from many customers for many years and what's the right way to host Vaadin application. We always say that, yeah, it depends. And that's a lousy answer for any question. And then customers have been inventing many ways of hosting. And eventually it came to become super popular to start hosting on Kubernetes. And the problem with that is that it requires quite a lot of know-how to set it up right. So this is trying to address that need and set it up right for you with a single button click.
Cool. The person who was asking the question was concerned with the stateful nature of Java. And I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll let you, Jonas, answer how it's handled.
Oh, yeah. So Kubernetes, they have this concept of ingress. So basically load balancer in the beginning, in the kind of front. We use Nginx named ingress, so kind of standard open source stuff in there. And when it load balances between flow applications, it uses sticky sessions. So one person always is routed to the same server. I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and that pretty much answers to the next question, which was regarding the horizontal scaling. What about session data? So that's
yeah. We do. So some people have had intuition that we should be serializing session data, and some customers are doing that, and it's almost always a bad idea. So Vaadin Flow has quite a bit of stuff in the session, And if you would be serializing the whole session for every request, it's quite a bit of overhead. I mean, cloud can hide it. It's just kind of a higher bill on your from your cloud vendor. But the bigger problem is that then you need to be making everything serializable in Vaadin application. That's a pain in the ass to do that when you are developing the application. So my recommendation, don't do any serialization. Just trust on the sticky sessions. It's much faster, cheaper, and painless.
Yeah, if you only need scaling, then you don't need any session serialization. If you want to have kind of high availability so that even if one server explodes, then the application still keeps running without interruption for all users, then you need to think about sticky session serialization. But then you probably also kind of have a budget to deal with that, because that's a quite expensive requirement to have regardless.
Yeah, I guess the other is if you have kind of rolling updates on the fly, but that's also a kind of control situation where you maybe have a few sessions you need to move over, not that you need to replicate them all the time.
Yeah, and
we don't do rolling updates yet, but that's a feature that is in the roadmap. So we'll be implementing blue-green strategy for rolling updates so that you can do those updates completely transparently. All right, so
quick question before we move forward with Leif's presentation.
And not yet. I have a lot of stuff to show.
One quick question. Hey, Jonas, how about using one control center instance for multiple Vaadin applications? Will it work?
It does. So the screen that we see in here, there is a deploy button, so you can deploy as many applications in there as well you want to. The intent here is that these applications probably need to be somewhat, or kind of it makes sense to have them somewhat related. The security model is that these will be deployed in the same Kubernetes namespace, in the same cluster. They likely want to share the same user management, so there's one key cloak in there. So if you have a bunch of related applications, like, I don't know, reporting application, and admin application, and mobile whatnot application, then it makes sense to kind of deploy these together. If you have unrelated applications, what I would do is to have a separate control center for those.
Cool, thanks.
Hey, I want to kind of show one thing before here. So jump into the next topic. So how do you actually deploy to cloud? So in this case, I'm using just for an example, DigitalOcean cloud, and over there you can create a Kubernetes cluster with the click of a button. I'm based in Bay Area, so I'll choose San Francisco in here. And you basically, this is pretty much the same for any cloud. Then you just choose how many nodes, how many servers I want to have in my cloud. I just accept the default in there, even though it's a bit too expensive for me. So anything, basically the basic configuration is one server with 2 gigs of RAM. So it creates you a Kubernetes cluster, and after it has created that, some kind of let's just step through the wizard. Yes, we understand all of this, or didn't read. So the next thing is to kind of copy the Kubernetes config file from the cloud. I can just export that to be the cloud I'm using. So if I'm running this same K9S tool, it actually shows what is running in their cluster. And then from my laptop, I can just install Control Center again, exact same command, and I get that to run on the cloud. In this case, I didn't want to kind of open up any that to the world. So instead of having that open to the world, I use port forward just for myself for this example, and set my laptop port 9000 to forward to this control center in the DigitalOcean cloud. So the control center is running in the cloud, and then we go through exact same install process. Let me kind of scroll through, because this is exactly the same. Maybe kind of one difference is that now this actually has a real IP address with the real load balancer in the real cloud. So I need to be kind of setting up names to point to this particular IP address. I had done that already, so I can just check that my DNS is working. So that's kind of only difference setting up the names between running that in your local laptop and cluster. And the login, all of that is exactly the same. So let's deploy the same application. And you can just say that I happen to have a couple of servers in there, so you can just initiate multiple replicas right away on not my local, my joel.fi. This is actually running right now if you want to try it out. And yeah, there we have it. So it's deploying locally or deploying to cloud is pretty much the same process. Disclaimer, this video is cut. I have cut the wait times away from this. So like unfortunately, DigitalOcean doesn't create a new cluster in a second. It takes like 10 minutes in this case instead. So I want to speed up things for us not to be waiting for that to be created. Anyways, that was all of it. The rest of the demo is exactly the same. Did we still have some questions, or should we hand over to Leif?
I think there was one more question specific about Control Center, which is if it's possible to use it with other environments like AWS Fargate.
No, so this is purely for Kubernetes. Amazon has pretty extensive Kubernetes support, so if you want to do that, use that with AWS, you should be using that on top of Amazon's Kubernetes support instead.
I just wanted to say that I think that this is really cool. It takes care of multiple kind of things that you need to do in every application, but also kind of thinking forward that in the same sense that Kubernetes provides kind of a standardized way of hosting your applications. Also, when you know that your application is deployed with Control Center can provide things to your application. Like you mentioned that it's coming with a Postgres database, and that opens up for things like the question about what other modules. I'm kind of excited about the future, what other things we can invent here.
So let's give an example. No promising on the roadmap yet. One of the things that I'm pretty excited about is that now when we know how this is hosted, and we happen to be having access to Postgres instance, and Postgres happens to be actually freaking good in also as a vector database. So there's a vector extension. So why couldn't we use that? So, and if you happen to already have this admin UI for your Vaadin application named Control Center, could there be things like ingestation for RAG? So basically, you could connect that to your own data sources. It automatically kind of pulling data from your data sources, pushing that to the vector database. And if you have all that in place, could we just add a component in Vaadin that could be AI chat with your own data in there? Basically, one component and a couple of buttons for configuring, and then you could add a full AI chat with your company's data right in your Vaadin application. This is just an example what type of things we hope that it will be enabling in future. So Control Center is kind of the foundation for that type of full stack functionalities.
That's quite awesome. It's like Control Center is like Vaadin is creating modern web applications easy for Java developers. It also makes now it easy to deploy Vaadin applications into production with the industry best practices on scalability and security and things like this.
Yeah. So one kind of metaphor we've been using in the past is that when you have in Vaadin both components and the backend and the front end all working together in harmony, you could kind of build your application like you would be building those out of ready-made Lego blocks, because the Lego blocks they are three-dimensional. They can contain both the backend and the front end and understand each other. So when we extend this platform now to be wider, including also knowing about the deployment, we could have even larger blocks. Marketing folks have been thinking that it's a wrong term to use, but I like to think them as Duplo blocks, like a really big blocks. And in a sense, having like user management being just one block, you just plug it in application, it works. Or you would get AI chat as a one block in your application, or internalization or whatnot. So it's I think it paints an exciting future how we can elevate the development teams using Vaadin even further by making those blocks available, not requiring to use any of those, but kind of giving them more toys to play with.
Absolutely. And at this stage, I guess we would really, really want to hear from you, our audience, how you feel about Control Center. Get your hands dirty with it once it's available, and let us know. How do you feel?
It's available today as beta. I guarantee there are all kinds of bugs, so you can play around with that. And please share feedback and what doesn't work, because it's really in its early MVP stages. But yeah, maybe we should kind of hop over to the rest of the cool things that we are shipping.
Yes, indeed.
I'll add Leif to the stage. Maybe.
Yay, hello.
There we have it.
Yep. Actually, we had a question from Knubi about Spring Framework 7 that was announced today for November 2025. So don't know yet, because I've been busy with other things today. So not really, other than noticing that, yeah, that happened. But we haven't had any other specific plans for Vaadin 25. So maybe that will be what happens. But we'll have to look at things into more detail before we know for certain.
Knubi, you can also corner both Leif and Josh Long at Vaadin Create. So that way we can kind of not let these guys escape the room before you have answers on this. Or promises.
Yeah, I think he promised to corner me on another topic already, so I'm prepared.
Yeah.
All right, but anyways, what's new in the flow and the frameworks? Framework and the components, I mean. One, I kind of cheated a little bit. I have some code prepared here. I created my view with the things I want to show. And then I also want to just add a menu annotation to it. So we added this in 24.4, but then it only impacted the Hilla menu. But this application actually has a flow main menu. And now something is broken. Let's reload. Now we got the menu, the new demo view in the menu. So the way this works in the main layout is that we actually have here, I mean, this is what you get generated from start.vaadin.com if you say that you want to use the pre-release. So actually it gets the list of everything with a menu annotation, and then you can just simply iterate through these or do whatever more complicated things you want to do also. So now when we open this view, another interesting thing happens, because I didn't tell that this view that I just added to the menu, that it should be shown inside this main layout with the menu and so on. But because we have here on the main layout class, we got an @layout annotation, which is a new thing. So with this, applications will automatically use that, or kind of views will automatically use that if you haven't defined any other layout for it. Of course, if you don't want to do that, you can still keep doing things by explicitly defining the layout in the route annotation, like in previous versions. But with this, you don't need to do anything else than just add your @root annotation, and then everything is automatically set up, and then also at menu to opt in for having it in the menu. Next feature I want to show is I've got a grid, I actually have defined a record class for it and one testing instance of that record. And then, like I already showed for 24.4, you can now configure your grid based on a record type, and it gets the columns based on that. But what happens if I don't set any data to it? Well, then we just get an empty grid, and that might be a little bit confusing. So now we're adding this new feature to the grid that you can also define either an empty state component, so you can put another grid inside it if you really want, or you can also just set like any text. So you see that, well, okay, well, you should probably write something more, but basically explain to the users that maybe you have filtered so that there's 0 rows found, or whatever is the reason. So you can put that there. And this also then, if you put this back, and then I had a button here where I'm gonna do grid dot set items and nothing at all. So I mean, this also works dynamically. So now we have the item here, and then if I change things, then it automatically starts showing the empty content instead. So that's the grid empty content. Next new component feature, and this feature is for both Flow and Hilla. Next feature also for both Flow and Hilla is something called a popover component. So this is a UI component that you can use to create your own kind of more complex pop notification kind of things, or tooltip kind of things. So we can, for instance, let's just add a new H1 with hello, almost. Well, that's good, close enough. And then we say to the popover that you target the button, for instance. So in this way, now by default, when I click, is the default trigger. So that maybe doesn't make sense for a button. So I can also say popover dot set open on hover true. And then now when I move the mouse over this, then the popover shows. So you can do this to do kind of tooltips with rich content in, and lots of other use cases also. Next thing I want to show you is a little bit about form binding. So that's actually the form here on the bottom. Similar to how we made the grid data bind to records, we also made the form data bind to records. So here I'm using the same value record that we had up here. It only contains one record component here. And then here I can just do it kind of binder for field, and then just use the value here. Read the bean, that's easy. But the problem is when saving, because I mean, binder dot write bean wouldn't work, because if I pass in a record, that record is immutable, so it can't be updated. So we added a write record API here also. Now there might be validation errors, so we need to take care of those also. But otherwise, we can now just get the value out of it, and notification show that thing that we just saved. Now it needs to be a string like this. So now if I change something here and save, then it actually created a new record with the value from the field. Last thing with forms is if I got a value field and I set the min length of it, for instance, let's put it to 5. Then when I just edit something here and I put something short in it, you see it's, okay, we got that annoying popover also, but it turns red. It's maybe not super visible, but it turns red, and then it says some please lengthen this text, blah, 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 some built-in message. But what I can also do is that we can configure this. It's done through the i18n messages feature. So let's create an i18n instance, and then we can set the min length error message to like need more letters or something, and go away. So now if I do something too short here, then it actually shows this message both kind of visibly here, and also if I have the mouse over it, then it will all... No, actually, that's still... Oh, that's an interesting bug. But anyways, the message at least goes here. Next thing I want to show you, Hill. That's also a framework we're doing, and yeah, I don't have it here, but I have a Hill view in my application because I just hid it to not confuse you. So let's change it here. Ta-da! Now we got a Hill. Okay, we need to refresh again. Interesting. Didn't I fix that bug already? Empty. Well, we got a demo effect, but that's no problem. What I wanted to show, but that doesn't work, and it still doesn't work. Cool. What I wanted to show is in 24.4 we added the possibility of adding flow views inside Hill layouts. Now in this version we're also making possible the opposite, except that something is broken that wasn't broken an hour ago when I tested this. So unfortunately I can't really show this anymore, but let's at least remove this layout annotation. Then hopefully I need to restart also so I can show the very last feature. This might be one of the reasons why we concluded that, yeah, maybe let's not do release candidates till today or tomorrow. So there were a couple of bugs here. Okay, now I don't got any layout anymore, but at least I got my Hill view. So yeah, this should actually have been inside the flow layout, and it used to work, but no idea what's broken now. The last thing I want to show you is I got this very impressive click count button. I've shown such things before. It uses a signal here for actually keeping track of the count, which means that, yeah, well, I can, for instance, create another one, and then they kind of count together. But the cool thing that we're adding as a preview feature is that you can also share this signal value between multiple users at the same time. So I have defined here a count service, which just returns a number signal from the kind of backend. And then now I can just very easily say that, well, let's count service dot count. This is kind of replacing the regular signal with this shared signal that is shared between multiple or between all the users looking at that
full stack signal. Kind of full stack signal.
Yes. So now when I got two browser opens here, they all share the same value and multiple components there and so on. This is a preview feature. It's a little bit limited what it can do right now, but we really want to collaborate with users also. So if you have any use case where you think this would make sense to try out, then please reach out to me, and we will kind of help you get started with it, help you get to have a say on what are the things that are most needed there and so on, because, well, we have our ideas, but they probably don't match what anyone else would need. So that's our desire there. Those were the kind of highlights of the things outside of Copilot and Control Center on my mind. Of course, there's many more things in the release notes. I had a list of things that I should mention that I already forgot about. So just read the release notes, right?
Pretty cool features, and I mean, we could clearly see which one was the actual live demo.
Yep.
Yeah, hats off for the live demo. It's always a exciting thing to do. You'll never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting for me. It's exciting for the audience. Well, what more can you have on a Tuesday evening or morning, depending on your time zone? Cool.
Thanks, Leif. That was really interesting. Thanks, Mark, as well for the Copilot stuff, and Jonas for everything regarding the Control Center and the broader vision of Vaadin platform. We have a few questions Well, one question was regarding the Flex layout and no documentation about that.
Yeah, I can mention that. So Flex layout, it's not new, but it's kind of, we don't have any direct use case for it. It's more kind of just happens to be there as a consequence of other things we have built. So I mean, in most cases, you can just use a div instead, and you get all the same features. But we get that question every now and then, and we should probably add that documentation still.
How about monitoring and logging? I can take this one. So this is exactly what we are looking to add to Control Center somewhere early next year. So both, I mean, the underlying Kubernetes, they take care of the basic logging. So you can, it already collects logs, and you can kind of use Kubernetes tooling for taking a look of those. But we would like to kind of bring all of those to Control Center, have full-blown observability in there as well, and to able to kind of monitor your application, and hopefully eventually going to also seeing performance monitoring in there, so that you could ask it, for example, to send you a message if in your production application some of the APIs start to be taking way too long. So you could kind of go and check them out before the customers start complaining that something is broken in there. But that's kind of for the future for the Control Center.
Cool. Leif, can we set components for grid empty state?
Yes. So there's in the Flow Java API, there's two different methods: set empty state text and set empty state component. You can use whichever, and if you use both at the same time, well, you will see what happens. I don't remember, but yeah, there's support for that. And then in the React and Web Component APIs, there's also similar things there. They don't need to have separate methods because HTML is HTML, but yeah, that's supported.
Awesome, good stuff. I don't see any other questions that we have open here in the chat at the moment. If that's really the case, then I think we can start moving to the end of the session. We've gone through quite a few interesting features, and as the last reminder, we are going to have the Vaadin Create in the end of this month in Germany. And as a thank you for our lovely audience, you managed to go all the way till the end of the webinar. Now you've got your chance to register, and by using the webinar promo code, you'll get 200 euros off of the ticket. Hope to see you, as many as possible of you in the Vaadin Create. It's going to be quite interesting, packed with lots of demos and really good discussions. So hope to see you all there. And thank you very much for you being in this session. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Leif, Mark, and Jonas for the presentation and demos. And as I mentioned, we got some webinars in the planning at the moment. Going to do a bit more deeper dive into some of the topics that were covered today. So hope to see you there in our upcoming webinars as well.
And I think you can also, if you have any feedback on what type of topics you would like to hear on our webinar series, reach out to Mika. He's the good guy to coordinate all of this. And 24.5 is almost out, so try out the beta, or if you dare, or wait a week and get to RC and try that out and give us feedback. It would be awesome to hear what you think about these new features.
Well said. Thank you
all. Right.
all.
See you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See you at Create.
Bye-bye.